One of the subjects in a widely seen QAnon documentary is boggled by all the parents dying in Disney films and thinks this traumatizes children.
Trauma to the child, why? It's so horrible. What a bad story. Why do you need to start a story with a parent dying? Always. It's so sad.
First of all, who's ever heard of this? Like I saw Bambi and then I was never the same after? Dead parents in children's films are tropes because parents do die before you. That's the best case scenario. But even more importantly, it's a metaphor. We one day must leave our parents, become adults, and venture into the world on our own. Bambi's mother dies midway through the film, and at the end of the film, Bambi himself becomes a parent, becomes an independent adult. This is the journey we all must take. We love our parents, and they love us, and then we leave them behind. Apocalypse.
This marks the beginning of the rise of the Antichrist. He will control 10 kingdoms, which in turn will control the world. The Antichrist will sit in the temple of God and he will declare to the whole world that he is God.
Lots of magical thinkers believe some sort of historic calamity is imminent. My guess is this originates in our tribal desire to unite in anticipation of some large challenge or threat. And this coming event will justify your hard work and sacrifice. You'll be rewarded when good things like hunting season or harvest come, or when bad things like disaster strike. In the New Testament's book of Revelation, the apocalypse is the end of times, where God destroys the evil leaders and the entirety of earth and delivers the righteous to paradise. Some evangelical Christians believe in the rapture, which is similar, but all the good Christians get swept up to heaven, leaving behind all the sinners to suffer. The cult leader Jim Jones believed in something called translation, where his followers would all die and have a blissful afterlife on a new planet. This is where we got the phrase, drink the Kool-Aid, because his followers ultimately all knowingly drank poison Kool-Aid and died. Alex Jones has been warning of some coming New World Order globalist genocide for over 20 years. He frequently warns his audience that the time for bloody conflict is coming. You will need to lock and load. Often he then segues into plugs for prepper goods.
2020 is a very special year to the globalists, to the occultists, to those that are into esoteric mysticism. And they believe this is the year they're going to totally overthrow America and the world. And I also want you to know that our 4th of July, once-a-year mega sale is here.
And with Q, they believe in something called the storm, which was inspired by this empty threat Trump made to North Korea.
Maybe it's the calm before the storm.
What's the storm?
Could be the calm before the storm.
The storm will be the time when all the pedos will be arrested or worse. It seems like an unsustainable thing. There's this endless promising of a great coming event that is just around the corner. It's almost here. It's just about to happen. It never does happen. It just doesn't seem to matter. The Jehovah's Witnesses have been doing Armageddon predictions for a century. When you're invested this much, people just rationalize away the failures and queue up the next prophecy. That's a pun.
Please clap.
Good and evil.
Then they're going to start killing folks. You know, walk up, shoot you right in the head. The left's getting ready for their revolution. They're going to take your kids. They're going to take your money. They're going to take your health. They're going to take your life.
This last one isn't necessarily magical on its own, but it's so interwoven with magical thinking, and it's potentially so toxic that it has to be included. Good and evil thinking is just a tribal behavior where the in-group, your tribe, is good, and the out-group, that other bunch of assholes, is bad. With magical thinkers, this good and evil categorizing is extreme. Everything is stark black and white. You can see this in the QAnon community, which divides characters into the categories of white hats and black hats, which is a cliche from old westerns. If you're a white hat, like General Flynn, everything you do is right. If you're a black hat, like Hillary, everything you do is wrong. Magical thinkers are attracted to stark simplicity.
He was a fabulous individual, a man whose presence brought fear to the lawless
and hope to those who wanted to make this frontier land their home.
They're attracted to certainty because they're trying to ease their anxieties. They want clear resolution. Ambiguity, contradictions, and nuance, the stuff of life, those all take a bunch of thinking. Magical thinking is about closing the loop. Further thought is just dedicated to rationalizing the beliefs you already have. Sound familiar? I mean, we all do this. The difference here is the level of resistance to contrary evidence, which is profound. The imperviousness to reason is almost absolute. In QAnon, Trump is the whitest of all white hats because he's going to bring the storm one day. The hero worship of Trump is completely over the top and absurd, and the vilification of their enemies is its mirror image. The rhetoric about black hats is often violent and sadistic. Plenty of Anons unequivocally state their yearning for public executions. There's a clear, sadistic craving for vengeance and the infliction of suffering. Anons sometimes warn of pain coming and use the Punisher logo as an icon. Why the Punisher rather than one of many other superheroes? The Punisher is ruthless. The Punisher kills. Not everybody in QAnon thinks this way, but there is clearly a lot of bloodlust in this community.
There are kids being hurt day in, day out, being sold!
And the reason for this is obvious. If you think your opponents are raping, murdering, and eating defenseless children, you're not going to be real concerned about restraint. Without this extreme vilification, magical beliefs often just seem like kind of kooky and harmless hobbies. I'm not concerned about people who believe in UFOs or ghosts or astrology. This extreme black and white rhetoric is alarming because it dehumanizes enemies. And when people aren't seen as humans anymore, that's when atrocities happen.
It rubs the lotion on its skin or else it gets the hose again.
Okay.
I'm not saying this will happen at scale with something like QAnon, because as with a lot of online venting, I think most people don't really mean what they're saying, but there are people who are consuming these ideas and snapping. Extreme dehumanization like this cannot lead anyplace good. So here's what's going on in America, folks. I figured it all out. America is now a dystopian sci-fi franchise in which the characters have split into two tribes, the magical thinkers and the evidence seekers. These people are not making sense of the world in the same way and perceive different realities. Right now, the world is impossible to truly comprehend for anybody, but many of us can at least get some sort of functional grasp on what's happening, and even more importantly, avoid falling for preposterous claims that are obviously impossible.
What's inside? Possibilities. What we deliver by delivering.
We're now seeing people who have less time, less cognitive tools, less education. They can't keep up. They are alarmed by the state of the world, they're anxious, they can't make sense of it, and they're being drawn to magical explanations like QAnon and Pizzagate and COVID conspiracy theories. I'm not saying evidence seekers never think magically, everybody's a bit magical, and I'm not saying they're right all the time. They are wrong plenty because our world is incomprehensibly complex. Anybody making claims or predictions about modern society is going to be wrong a lot. But evidence seekers will also be right a lot. For instance, scientists have been wrong plenty about COVID, which is a new and extremely complicated virus. But they've been right even more. We have tests because of science. We comprehend the basic mechanics of this disease because of science. If COVID is one day extinguished, it will be science that does it. Magical thinking, or ideology for that matter, cannot cure disease. These are not systems of knowledge, and they cannot build solutions. They can only criticize and second guess. Magical thinkers will rarely be right, and it'll mostly be luck when they are. With technical or complex matters, evidence seekers are going to outperform magical thinkers by a lot, because they have at least some comprehension of what is actually happening. And leaders who are magical thinkers are going to waste time and resources fighting imaginary enemies and hurting innocent people. I know what a lot of you evidence seekers are wondering. You're into fixing stuff. You're wondering, how do we fix this? This is a really difficult question. I don't claim to have the answers, and my intent here is to present some crude initial thoughts and open this up to further discussion and thought. Here's what I think. You definitely don't reason your way out of it. Can you reach people who haven't completely drunk the Kool-Aid? Yes. But mostly, you're not going to convince your brother or your mom or whoever that Q or some COVID conspiracy doesn't exist. That's the evidence-seeking mindset. If I provide you with excellent reasoning and sources, you will change your mind. This paradigm isn't convincing to magical thinkers, so don't waste your breath. Evidence seekers need to learn to communicate with magical thinkers. Leaders need to translate scientific and empirical concepts into magical terms. We need to learn to speak their language. Otherwise, they're just getting spoken to by amoral con men and people who are detached from reality. We need to use symbols, connect the dots. We need to personalize. We need to highlight the sacred. We need to present inspiring and challenging future events. We need to portray good and, at least bad. There should be science and rationality and data behind these narratives, but they get translated into language that resonates with magical thinkers. Jonathan Haidt's The Righteous Mind isn't about magical thinking, but I think it overlaps with what would work. Education should be prioritized in society. In particular, I believe everyone should have solid scientific comprehension. Teachers should be held in high esteem. Teachers should be paid well. Teacher should be a job lots of people want. The field of education should attract top minds. People aren't just stuck with their pre-installed magic software. We can upgrade. When we learn about how the world works through science, through history, through great art, we can override this programming. I believe tech companies need to intervene and police this stuff to some degree. Twitter recently announced its plans and we'll see how they fare. I realize this is controversial, but regular people are too busy or too lazy or don't have the tools to be responsible for filtering out vicious nonsense. I'm a middle-aged liberal. I believe in free speech. You can almost entirely say what you want, but I don't think platforms should amplify you. I think the libertarian vision of a free speech utopia is not reality. Unfortunately, I wish it was. I think platforms need to get their hands dirty, and I'm sure how tech companies manage this has plenty of flaws and can be improved. Lastly, and this one's pretty easy, we need to address the causes of anxiety in our society. So just fix society. It's pretty basic, it's low-hanging fruit. I realize this is hopelessly vague, but I believe I'm respecting the complexity of this challenge by not getting specific. Widespread fear, anxiety, and uncertainty is the root of everything. If you can crack this, the ship rights itself. This is where problem solvers should focus our energy. We need to improve social conditions so that people are less frightened and feel more sense of control, and they have purpose and meaning. Massive challenge, especially when society is so atomized. For energetic, optimistic folks looking to create social change, projects that make people feel more secure will have an enormous cascade of positive effects. I also think this applies at the level of family and friends. If your dad or your sister or, God forbid, your kids get into QAnon or whatever, try to help them feel more secure in life. Try to help them be happier and understand that if they're going to find their way out, they'll do it themselves for their own reasons. If they want to talk about conspiracy stuff, you gotta clearly say you're not interested in that. Be patient, have good times with them, be firm, but love them. Magical thinkers are just using the tools they have access to with the temperaments they have. And if any one of us were wired differently, or were less fortunate with our opportunities or our education, this could be you, it could be me, and all this stuff would feel convincing. It would feel real. And we would protect these beliefs for a long time because it alleviates our fears and makes us feel like we have some control. So remember that fear, anxiety, and a lack of control are the oxygen that fuel this fire. When we reduce these emotions, we dampen this magical instinct, probably along with a lot of other destructive impulses. Those are my opinions. I'm happy to hear yours in the comments below. Thank you all for watching. If you want to see more of this, come back me on Patreon. All hail Beyonce.